I already pressed started. Does it show up as started?
It's
Yes.
started now.
Okay.
Sorry,
Okay, so I guess I have to repeat everything again. Did everyone hear? So hello everyone, we have started the event right now. Have you just got in the space or did you hear all the introductions? Can someone confirm?
I didn't hear any introductions.
No, we didn't hear anything.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, then I will go over again. I'm sorry. There was a technical mistake. So just very quickly, and apologies again for making you wait. Well, good morning and afternoon and evening, everyone, and welcome and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Christina, and I'm part of the Committee of Capacity Building Network team at the UNFCCC, so the PCCB network. And I would like to welcome you to this event titled Right-Based Finance for Climate and Biodiversity, Enabling Just Transition and Transformative Change. This event is convened by Sweet Bio, the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, the Climate Development Knowledge Network, and SOCA GACA International through the PCCB network. We're grateful to you, for your co-organizers, for bringing us together around such an important and timely theme. Before we begin, I would like to quickly introduce you to the Paris Committee on Capacity Building, because I'm sure not everyone is aware of that or not even a member of the PCCB network. So, well, first of all, the PCCB works to address current and emerging gaps and needs in implementing capacity building in developing countries. And additionally, the PCCB seeks to enhance capacity building efforts, including coherence and coordination in capacity building efforts related to climate change. So to support the PCCB's mission and mandate, the PCCB network was launched as a platform to share information on best practices, contribute to the work of the PCCB in fulfilling its mandate, and connect stakeholders engaged in climate-related capacity building across sectors and regions. As of today, the PCCB network has over 400 organizations from 100 countries, and they are all actively engaged in strengthening capacities for climate action. In addition to the network, the PCCB also hosts its annual capacity building hubs at the Conference of Parties. So the next one is going to be at COP30 in Brazil, in Belém. And these hubs serve as dedicated spaces for collaboration, co-creation of knowledge, or learning among the global capacity building community. We will share more details on that. As you know, this COP is different from previous years, and we will get back to you with more information in case you have shared interest before the deadline was closed to celebrate any event with us. To learn more about the PCCB network and how to become a member, you can access our website. My colleague will share more details in here in the chat. And if you have any questions or anything, you can also feel free to share it in the chat. So turning back to today's webinar, this session provides an opportunity to explore how rights-based finance can help create enabling conditions for action, while also supporting the synergistic implementation of multilateral environmental agreements. And through today's exchange of knowledge, experiences, and case studies, we hope to inspire greater collaboration across the climate, biodiversity, and human rights agendas, and to build the capacities needed for transformative change. I'm really looking forward to these insights from our distinguished speakers, experts, practitioners, even participants, because there's going to be breakout discussions. And I would like to sincerely thank you all for being here, co-conveners, panelists, and all the audience. So with that, now officially, I'm giving the floor to Puri, and we can start this webinar. Thank you so much.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, in whichever time you are. My name is Aishana Puri Hertz. I am the head of climate partnerships and external relations at Sweat Bio. Sweat Bio is it is a development program which is hosted by the Stockholm Resilience Center. So with that, hopefully that's clear. I'm based in Stockholm, so it's really nice to meet everyone here. Just echoing Christina before, so thank you to the co-organizers, but of course, big thanks to PCCB also for facilitating this event today. So why we want to talk about rights-based finance for biodiversity and climate, I think the full The full elaboration will be delivered by my colleague here, Haitor from Jibin, but I would also like to present a little bit the history, why we actually got here. So essentially, the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework, so we're basically going across a different convention right now, was adopted in October during the COP15 of the CBD, and it entails a section called the Section C. And the Section C talks about, among others, well, the Section C, maybe I should start with that it's actually kind of like an overarching guidance on how the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework should be implemented. And then so under that Section C, one of them is that it says that the GBF needs to be implemented, or it has to be implemented following a human rights-based approach. But then, of course, to achieve the goals and targets under the GBF, there's some financing needed. But then what does that mean then in that case? A financing that follows a human rights-based approach. And that's why we are in this. And on another note, actually, Swedbio, together with CDKN, also Sokagaka International, and a few others, UN organizations such as UNESCO, UNDP, the Secretariat of the CBD's OHHR, we have been embarking in a process called a dialogue process to also explore a little bit or explore more, what does that mean, a human rights-based approach? And then now in the whole discussions around synergies across the Rio conventions, like how we need to kind of like implement synergistic approach or holistic approach. There's also we need to understand, what does that mean? What does that mean to run a project or to implement actions that is locally led and following a human rights-based approach? So they're kind of like these two streams coming together, and this is the reasons why we're here, actually. And then so today we would like to discuss with you, and we really hope that this event could be a moment where we can discuss together. We're not coming here to just tell you like, this is what it is. There are some questions that we would really like to hear from you and so on. And there's some questions we want to hear from you. There's some questions we would like to check in with you. So yeah, and then it could be that this is the first discussion of some other follow-up discussion that we will have. So that could be like a continuation process. One thing, maybe before we get into the kind of core of the discussion today, we would also really like to know about you a little bit. And then I think Hator already shared the Mentimeter. And I was actually wondering if we could, Hator, is there any results that we can show before we get to you?
Let me check. I think we do have. Kind.
Yeah. I was actually wondering, sorry, team is actually quite a new thing for me. I was actually wondering, just from the participants then in that case, how Okay, so we have it here. I was going to ask, like, how familiar are you with rights-based financing or direct funding or something similar, actually? But maybe we could check the results of the Menti. Okay, so we have, yeah, we cover almost all regions around the globe. And then, yeah. And then we have UN organizations, we have philanthropy, financial institutions, private sector, and civil society, which is really nice, indigenous peoples and local communities, and others. Okay, so I'm really curious about this. Please share 3 words that came to mind when you think of human rights and finance. So the most popular are balance and trust, but they're also like accountability, direct access, funding for humanity, human rights defenders, if I'm not mistaken, IPLCs, justice, people and planet, profit, interesting, sustainable, unrestricted, and welfare. Okay, so I think many of these keywords we will also discuss today, or it will be brought up. So I'm really looking forward to our discussion today. I'm going to hand over to Hater to bring us into the conversation and provide the framing of the whole discussions with some background. Hater, over to you.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you very much, Puri. It's a really pleasure to be here. I'm Heitor. I'm from Brazil. I'm policy co-coordinator for the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, which is also co-hosting this webinar and working as economist for the Conservation Strategy Fund. As Puri mentioned, my role today is just to frame the discussions, explore a little bit more, but also not try to give specific directions. I think this is something that we are all ongoing, working together to define, to understand better approaches, constraints, but also the opportunities. So the first things first, there is no single or common definition of right-based finance. And here we are just trying to explore a broader perspective. So we are trying to see and explore right-based finance for biodiversity and climate, understood as an approach that aligns financial flows, policies, practices with international human rights obligations and principles. It ensures that the resources are directed to the people, communities, and nations most affected by environmental harm, while creating equitable financial conditions that enable fair access to and sharing of the resources needed for the good quality of life. It's an approach that addresses historical inequalities and requires meaningful participation in decision-making to promote inclusive governance of natural resources, and also places binding responsibilities on nations and international financial institutions, business, private donors to respect, protect, and uphold human rights by applying strong and socio-environmental safeguards, ensuring free, prior, and informed consent. So there are opportunities for us to explore other approaches for finance, and why this is important and why we are talking about right-based finance now. So the multilateral environmental agreements and other international agreements, they have already pointed us to this direction. So the Convention on Biological Diversity and the Global Biodiversity Framework have the mission on 2030 to halt and reverse biodiversity loss, but also the 2050 mission to living in harmony with nature. The framework, as Puri mentioned, have a section that is the section C that we mentioned, that is the section for the implementation of the framework itself, but it addressed that human rights-based approaches needs to be ensured during the whole implementation of the framework itself, while also making references for the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities, to the diverse value systems, to gender responsive approaches, and to intergenerational equity. And it specifically targets 18 and 19. It's also addressing the finance aspects of the framework. Target 18 is bringing us the need for reduce and redirect harmful subsidies on 500 million annually, and target 19 to mobilize additional 200 million also annually until 2030. So on the other side, also UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement have also ongoing negotiations that emphasize both just transition aspects for ensure climate action support vulnerable groups and communities, and also the new collective quantitative goals in CQG that was agreed in COP29, and now the currently 1.3 roadmap by Kuchibele, and it's also calling $1.2 trillion per year in climate finance. And most of these resources are expected to be covered by the private sector. So there is this issue that often the way that we're framing finance discussions is through a very funding gap approach. This can be read as a way that if you're adding more money to the pile, we would solve the crisis. But the reality is that biodiversity loss, climate change, they are not only financial shortfalls. Of course, that finance aspects are relevant, are essential, they are enabling conditions, but there are also a structural crisis about how resources are allocated, who is controlling resources, how we are valuing nature and nature contributions to people. So it's not only a focus on quantitative aspect, but also a focus on qualitative aspects. And each dollars means different responsibilities, means different allocations, means different access and different impacts and livelihoods. So we are all here because of the biodiversity crisis and the climate crisis, but both this crisis, the planetary crisis, it's also threatening fundamental human rights. The rights to a health environment, the rights to life, the rights to development. And once everyone, everywhere is being negatively impacted, not everyone is affected equally. So this heavily impacts are deep in global south, least developed countries, small islands, development state, and specifically indigenous peoples and local communities and other vulnerable groups, including future generations and generations to come. So at the same time, when we are trying to address actions to biodiversity and climate solutions, the responses are also trying to propose synergetic effects, but having mismatches. So climate actions that are not supporting biodiversity outcomes, or projects on the ground that are actually exacerbating socio-environmental conflicts or violation of human rights when they are entering territories without consultation, participation, safeguards, or not ensuring a directed process of co-design. If we take an in-depth look at this process, we might question ourselves, what are the causes of the planetary crisis? 2019, the International Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services have launched a global assessment and revealed at-risk direct and indirect drivers of biodiversity loss. But more recently, we have the launch of a new IP-based transformative change assessment that remind us that biodiversity loss has deep root causes, that are basically three: the disconnection from nature, the concentration of power and wealth, and that systems prioritize short-term materials gains over long-term well-being. These root causes, they are also expressed, they reflect, but they also reinforce, are reinforced by our financial system. So we have financial systems that now powerful actors also would like to protect their interest. We have financial structures that are deepening inequalities, are limiting government's ability to act, but also blocking reforms that could bring us more fairness. So after decades of mobilizing resources, we need to think about a new approach. We need to focus on real challenge that is confronting this structural driven of the crisis. So we need to deliver transformative change. Transformative change is challenge, but it's urgent and it's possible. So the same IPVIS assessment also highlights that transformative change is a fundamental system-wide reorganization of economic, social, and technological systems, including values. So it remembers that this is something disruptive. It proposes some principles and some strategies that we are not going to be able to explore here, but we're going just to bring attention to a few of them. So one of the principles is equity and justice, and two of the key sectors are reforming economies to prioritize nature and equity and tackle sectors that are primarily driven by biodiversity loss. So when we are placing this in a right-based finance approach, we are saying that this is also central. It can help us to address equity, justice, outcomes while we are advancing the strategies to improve the relationship between sectors that are driving biodiversity loss and also reshape economic and financial systems. So this is our bottom line, let's call it like that. The success of the conservation and climate finance is respecting, protecting, and fulfilling human rights in the face of biodiversity and climate crisis. It will depend on the volume of the funds mobilized, but also their distribution, their forms that they are funding, the ground, the activities that are supporting. So very briefly, these discussions can go to different directions. And we are not also being able here to showcase all the directions that it could go. So we are just bringing some insights on where right-based finance has been applied or where discussions on right-based finance are coming from, so we can stimulate debate. So one thing, what happens to right-based finance when public finance retreats? So right-based finance must also go through the lens of the international solidarity and historical reparation. Countries that have contributed least to climate change and biodiversity loss are the ones that are actually suffering most of the impacts. But they are lacking resources. They are not being provided with financial resources that they need to meet their urgent demands in relation with mitigation, adaptation, but even maintaining a good quality of life. So we have information that in 2024, the official development assistance fell 9%. And we also have projections for this year for a further reducement from 9 to 70%. At the same time, many low-income countries, they are trapped in debt. So over half of the debt of these countries, they are non-concessional, and they pay interests that usually are 4 to 8 times higher than wealth state. And today we also have the connection between that 19% of the countries that are most vulnerable to environmental impacts. They are also in or near a debt crisis. Once we are in debt crisis, we do not have fiscal space to invest in biodiversity and climate action. So we are being struggled in two directions. International finance is reducing ODA at the same time that we are seeing other movements to reallocate resources to other areas, including potential allocation for military, but also on the national level, budget is being constrained, and this is directly related with the debt crisis. So that's why we can bring this right-based finance to review global priorities, to think about how can we restructure debt how can we improve and give fiscal space for countries to improve resource allocation for biodiversity and climate actions in a matter of justice, equality, and rights of all nations for their own development. At the same time, once we are having these public constraints, the narrative is driving full attention to private finance or blended finance schemes. And then we would question ourselves also, is private capital enough to sustain a right-based finance? And then evidence on the past decade have showed that private and blended finance have failed to address biodiversity and climate crisis, because data has been showing us that most of the blended finance is actually being incorporated by public capital as well. So 73% of total blended finance are actually coming from public resources, while 27% is genuine private. And the mobilization of these resources is $15 billion per year, much less than what we have for the funding, both for biodiversity and climate. This is 2% of the funding needed for biodiversity, and much less than what is needed for climate goals. And the distribution of these resources is also complex, because 74% of these flows is actually going to middle income countries, and low income countries is only receiving 6%. At the same time, that 83% goes to corporates, to financial institutions, but little to nothing go to small and locally business and community-led initiatives. Furthermore, we have accountability weakness. Once results, they are reported in financial terms rather than in social, environmental, or right outcomes. And voluntary disclosure approaches now, they are more focused on provide information to shareholders and investors than to prioritize the assessment of impacts on ecosystems and human rights. So they are quite distinctive priorities. So these are a question for us to think, based on the track, how can private finance really be in the pathway of also for transformative change, or what do we need to do to rethink their role, and what are the threatenings, but also the opportunities that we have to figure out a new way for approaching. And finally, one of the biggest gaps is exactly climate and conservation finance is very little reaching indigenous peoples and local communities, despite their proven role in conserving biodiversity. Finance mechanisms, they have not been effective in securing land rights, supporting livelihoods, or even protected from violations and violence. From also past informations, we have information that global disbursements for land tenures and forest guardianship, they are less than 1% of the total official development assistance. And even if funding for indigenous peoples and local communities are increasing, they are increasing on a target-based mode, but not necessarily increasing in different approaches on the quality, the modality, the access of the funds itself. So the successful the efforts that we are pushing for conservation, they must recognize the rights and the contributions of those who have sustainable lifeways, and that these contributions to climate change and biodiversity. So conservation that involves sustainable stewardship will contribute to transformative change. But when it's inclusive, when it's well-resourced, when it's focused on places that have nature and people living in harmony. So these rights, they must be recognized and included, tenure rights and other. These are cost-effective strategies for transformative change that needs to be well highlighted. So finally, just to close, as I mentioned, just a very brief idea for different pathways where right-based finance are coming. there are spaces for everyone. Everyone have different places to work on right-based finance. And we just need to collective organize and think on how this can be driven. There are few proposals of principles on right-based finance, but this is still something to be developed, to be further discussed with others. But right-based finance will go on a direction for universality and equality of rights, doing no harm approach, participation and inclusion, accountability and transparency, non-discrimination and equity, environmental and capacity, and sustainability and intergenerational justice. So this, in the short, it's not about only mobilizing, but it's also about making finance a tool for justice, for equity, and for sustainability. Yes, so this is just the proposal for giving some insights, some inputs, some materials for us to think about during the session. And we are going also to have two other panelists that will bring us more case studies for us to think on the process. Both of them are coming from funders' approaches, so they are also trying to bring us institutional perspectives on how they are mobilizing funders on a right-based approach and what does that mean for their own organizations with their own community-led decision-making process. So I thank you very much for the space. We are going also to have breakout rooms and Q&A, so the points that I raised here might be bring it back later. But without further ado, I give the floor to Felix from Synchronicity Earth, which I thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Hitor, and everyone else. It's wonderful to be here with you today. I'm going to start by just giving a little overview of Synchronicity Earth for those of you who don't know us, which I expect are a lot. We are not that big. And then can talk a little bit about our experience and perspective on the role of philanthropy in supporting rights-based approaches or direct access funding. Very shortly about myself. My name is Felix. I am a senior program officer at Synchronicity Earth, where I'm focusing on our freshwater program and our Crystals Youth Fund. And I'm joining you all today from my apartment in London in the UK. So Synchronicity Earth, very high level. We're a UK-based charity funder, intermediary funder. We have a few hats. Yeah, could you move next slide, please? And at Synchronicity Earth, together with our partners, I should also mention for us, we don't use the word grantee. It's a little bit too transactional only. We prefer to use the word partners. So together with our partners, we envision a world in which both biological and cultural diversity are valued, celebrated, and flourishing. And since our founding in 2009, our focus and mission has been to champion effective conservation action, approaches and funding specifically for overlooked species and ecosystems. A very quick look at what we did last year. This figure, compared to the gap that you just presented, Hater, looks quite tiny. Last year, we delivered £5 million in programmatic funding, supporting 137 partners globally. And we're also very lucky to work with some of the people on this webinar today as partners. A really crucial figure here is that 61% of this funding went to local and national organizations, and we're working to increase this to at least 75% by 2027 as part of our organizational strategic goals. And this matters because, as I think a lot of us here know all too well, too often conservation funding is directed at large international NGOs, while local organizations and community-led organizations or youth-led organizations, those with the most knowledge and deepest connections to the local context, continue struggling for meaningful resources. And most of our funding is also flexible and does cover core costs, but again, that is a figure that we are currently working to increase. If people want to know more about us, I just put the link in the chat to our website and our annual report if you want to know a little bit more. Next slide, please. At a very quick glance on our approach, we work together with other funders to pool our resources together and make conservation funding more accessible to our partners. We work with funders and partners to reduce and streamline administrative processes, which sounds dry, but is quite important in making sure that more time can be spent on the actual conservation work on the ground instead of writing grants, writing the same grant application 6 times, writing the same report 6 times, just slightly different. We're also spending a very large a proportion of our time on building relationships and listening to our partners. This is crucial for us to ensure that we can continue to improving the way that we manage grants and partnerships. And we also apply a long-term lens to all of this. As we all know all too well, conservation doesn't happen in a 12-month funding cycle or in any funding cycle. It happens when you invest in people, communities, and ecosystems over time. Next slide, please. If we look at our approach to conservation, there's a few things that that we try and put a lot of attention to. The first one would be evidence. Our team leverages global expertise to identify overlooked priorities in nature conservation. To do this, we speak with a network of advisors, existing partners, community members, academics, decision makers across several levels to inform and guide this process. In all of this, inclusion is very important. Working in biodiverse regions demands understanding local context and supporting local communities. And we'll do our best to involve local communities and local voices to understand the local context. And that needs to include diverse perspectives, and especially perspectives of rights holders such as women, youth, and indigenous peoples and local communities. I already mentioned relationships before. The relationship component is crucial for all of this to work, but relationship building requires trust. Trust needs to flow both ways, and building trust takes time, which is a process that cannot really be rushed. I think the most important element here is obviously the support component. Beyond funding, we're also seeking to helping local organizations to grow. And by that, I mean, we're doing our best to support our partners to grow if they would like to, or in the way in which they want to grow. Growth can mean very different things for our partners, and it's important that they can decide what this means for them. As a funding partner, it's then our role to support them in achieving this ambition if our support is appropriate, relevant, and most importantly, if it's welcome and asked for. We don't want to assume that our support is always necessary or appropriate in every situation. Learning is also very crucial in all of this. We use feedback to boost our impact and support partners. We solicit feedback and act upon it to make sure that our processes become more suitable for the challenges our partners face as these challenges change over time as well. And last but not least, joining the dots as an intermediary, as a charity, as a funder, an organization that wears a few hats, convening, using that convening power for good is incredibly important. It would also be very naive to believe that we could overcome this challenge alone. I don't think there's anyone within our sectors that can reasonably believe that they can do this alone. We stand much, much better chances at overcoming our collective challenges by working together and looping together our resources, time, connections, energy, and ideas. Next slide, please. This is probably the core part of what I'll talk about today. And it builds on a report that we put together last year together with Forest People's Program. So last year on the margins of COP16 in Cali, we co-hosted a roundtable together with Forest People's Program on enhancing biodiversity finance for indigenous peoples and local communities, women and youth, which then came up with a set of recommendations for funders. We've taken this forward into our work and want to highlight just a few priorities that we've embedded across all of our work, across all of our programs, and which we see as crucial ingredients for supporting rights-based conservation approaches. Not all of this will necessarily sound groundbreakingly new, but still important to reiterate. First and foremost, as funders, our primary responsibility is to work together to increase the amount of accessible, direct, flexible, core and long-term funding going to indigenous peoples and local communities, women and youth. On the top of that, direct funding should be as close as possible to unrestricted. Too often funding is still very project focused, and we're in the process of moving away from that. A lot of other funders are in the process of moving away from that and really pushing for more unrestricted or close to unrestricted funding to go directly to these rights holder groups. Sometimes there's a structural or legal limitation to this, but we can try and should push the boundary of what we are currently doing and what we can do in the future. If we manage this well, this will help ensure that any direct funding can align with locally defined priorities and be appropriate for local context and dynamics. Indigenous peoples, local communities, women and youth are key partners in this work as rights holders. They're not mere beneficiaries in this work, but equal partners, and need to therefore be able to decide what to do with funding instead of having to fit a predetermined framing or box imposed by a funding strategy. Any conservation efforts on top of all of this need to respect and ensure that free, prior, and informed consent is secured. And this isn't just ticking the box exercise, but is a continuous exercise. Building trust, I mentioned that before, and all of this is crucial, needs to flow both ways and takes time. We also work with partners and other funders to create and convene more opportunities to exchange learning, facilitate collaboration across diverse stakeholders. Just one example of this is, we're doing this work together with the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, is to bring together youth funded cohort, to bring funders and youth organizations closer together and create joint efforts to increase direct funding to youth. It's in its pilot stage at the moment, and we'll see what the future holds for this. It's also important to work to reduce barriers for partners to access funding. This includes revising our own processes and improving those, but also working with other funders to collectively identify and remove structural barriers within our sector. Feedback from our partners in this is crucial. It's crucial to keep us and other funders accountable to our actions and our promises. We also don't see rights-based conservation approaches as a separate standalone piece. It's important to mainstream this across all of our conservation programs. That's what we encourage other funders to do as well. And last and not least, yes, we see ourselves as a biodiversity funder. We support conservation efforts, but this also includes supporting local leadership, tenure rights, and crucially supporting local advocacy efforts. Conservation and advocacy need to go hand in hand. Next slide, please. A key mechanism of our work, I mentioned it a little bit so far, is pooled funding mechanisms. It's something that we've put a lot of our focus on. Basically, the idea is that instead of each donor working separately, pooled funds allow multiple trusts, foundations, or different kinds of donors to come together. And this collective approach means we can support a much broader range of organizations, particularly in places that are traditionally underfunded or more difficult for some funders to reach. In our case, we put some of our own funding into this and then invite others to contribute to this. Most importantly, in our case, we do not take an overhead on any of that. So therefore, we're able to pass on 100% of funding that flows through us directly to partners on the ground. At Synchronicity Earth, so far, we've created pooled funds for the Congo Basin program, the Philippine program, Melanesia program, and freshwater program, which is what I'm focusing my time on, as well as the Crystals Youth Fund, and are exploring opportunities to grow this model. Next slide, please. And I think that's my last one as well. Just before I wrap up, also wanted to highlight that we're also working with other funders to reimagining philanthropy itself and how our sector works. It's quite common for funders to carry out due diligence on grantee partners, but it's not quite as common yet that it also happens the other way around. So for instance, we know our funders, there's different kinds of funding that they don't feel comfortable accepting, and therefore we carry out due diligence on funders who want to join our pooled funds to make sure that our partners are happy accepting that funding. In this process, we ask for and welcome feedback from our partners to ensure that their perspectives and concerns can be heard and influence this process. And only if a funder passes this due diligence, their funding can then flow into the pooled funds and directly to our partners. We also welcome if new potential grantee partners want to or need to carry out due diligence on Synchronicity Earth. And this has happened a little bit more in the recent past, which is wonderful because it increases accountability, is really essential in any trust building exercise, and make sure that transparency flows both ways. And these pooled funding structures, together with what we call our Conservation Funder Learning Circle that we're organizing at the moment for some of our donors, are also wonderful opportunities to connect, share learnings, challenges, discuss solutions and ideas. It's a good space to come together, think on how we can improve the way that our sector works and how we can more meaningfully channel more funding directly to the grassroots. Yeah, I think I'll stop it here and I'll hand over to Pori. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Felix. It's it's very interesting to listen to both you and Heitor also. And well, my first takeaway is that isn't it wonderful to have this type of conversation led by the youth, actually? I find this really, and I feel like the, kind of the one coming from the Stone Age. But the other thing is that it's also wonderful that actually what I'm going to deliver today in our discussion really aligns with what has been shared by both Felix and Heitor. Sorry, I'm just trying to make this on the presentation mode. Sorry. Okay, there you go. So yes. So my presentation is around shifting strategies for trust-based and human rights-based funding. And then, just like Felix did, I would like to bring you into, an introduction of what is SwedBio, who is SwedBio. I'm not really sure if you have heard of us before. I hope maybe some of you have done, but otherwise, so SwedBio is a development program for sustainable and equitable biodiversity management. However, we are moving more and more into working into nexus approach, so not just focusing on biodiversity, but looking into nexus of biodiversity, climate, and also human rights. And in any case, that's also the things that we have been doing for a long time, but we just want to be more explicit about it. And we work actually in two streams. One is the policy pathways, and then the other one is the local implementation pathways. However, in working in these two pathways, just like Synchronicity Earth, we also work with our partners on the ground. So not grantees exactly. Also for us, it's actually our partners. And so how we work at the local level, building evidence at the local level, locally led by the rights holders, and how to bring this evidence together into the policy arenas. In this case, especially the CBD being our central, but of course the UNFCCC too, because we work in this climate, biodiversity, and human rights. So in that sense, we work bridging local to global, and basically as a development program, working in the policy and working closely with practitioners on the ground, but hosted by the Stockholm Resilience Center at Stockholm University. We are also surrounded by academic communities that in a way we also position ourselves as a knowledge interface that really links practice, science, and policy. And in the way we operate and deliver our work, we are grounded in 5 main principles, which is first the human rights-based approach, the conflict perspective, gender equality, adaptive management approach, and equitable knowledge collaborations, because we are very aware in these complex social and ecological systems, there are diverse knowledge systems, and it cannot be just kind of like docked on one way of knowing. So basically like that's why we work around these equitable knowledge collaborations, and meaning that all the collaborations done with SwedBio, it has to be meaningful for all involved. And that's also the thing that we do then when we channel funding to our partners. So we follow principles of human rights-based approach, which actually Hater already mentioned before: the transparency, the participations, empowerment, supporting empowerment process and capacity development, non-discriminations, both ways accountabilities, and links to human rights obligations, meaning all activities that receive funding from SwedBio will have to make sure that basically it is about respecting, protecting, and fulfilling human rights. And then in this way, we do it with our partners. We focus on a trust-based collaboration, we focus on local agency, mutual accountability, and they decide what the project or what the activities, it could be project, program, it depends on how they want to do it. So they decide what is basically what they need to do, what is the most relevant to them. And then in this sense, we ensure that it ensures equity, inclusions, collaboration, shared power, respect, and also promoting traditional and local knowledge. Sorry. Yes. And then, so in that sense, we also provide funding to local organizations, some regional, but also global networks, which are basically led by the rights holders themselves. So not global networks led by duty bearers or the interlocutor between duty bearers and the rights holders, but really rights holders led. And then we focus that this collaboration needs to be guided by intentionality. And then the way we do these collaborations or like funding-based partnership is based on a long-term basis, meaning the level of funding may not be really high, but the thing is like it lasts for a long time. Like, for example, we have partners who have been working or collaborating with us for the last 15 years in the 22 years of existence of SwedBio, for example. And I mean, trust building takes time, but it's also something that is really worth it to do, because also then the impacts will be more sustainable rather than having to finish a certain activities within a certain time. And then so the reporting mechanism as a learning process is also we leave it to the partners that sure we have kind of obligations to report. However, the way they report and in which way, we also leave it to our partners in the best way they want to report. Like some would prefer to do the more conventional reporting system. Some would prefer to do it through, for example, stories, because the stories also shows the process, how things happen. And very often, sometimes we focus on the quantitative results, but the thing is like there are a lot of impacts that happens actually throughout the process. And it's important to capture those as well. And then in our funding, we also apply an adaptive approach. We understand that in these very complex social ecological systems, things emerge, things change. And that means maybe new opportunity comes, maybe another opportunity would arise or emerge in a way that makes basically the work more efficient, but it could also be because of a certain context where context changing, be it unfortunately natural disaster, for example, happens, or the change of the government and so on. I mean, the global pandemic that happened basically force people to work in different ways, and this adaptive management is very much needed, but also very happy to hear from our partners that they really appreciate this approach. And another one is the flexible approach. And to be perfectly honest, this is where I would also like to share, there's still some shortcomings around the flexible approach. As much as we want to be flexible around the work plan, we also have the kind of we are sometimes still struggling when, for example, the development funding would like to be reallocated to be a humanitarian funding, say, during a disaster that the funding is allocated for certain activities, implementation, locally led implementations, but then disaster occurred and then they would like to switch that funding for example, first kind of like first support to deal with the disaster. And that, for example, something that we are still learning more how to allow that kind of flexibilities to our partners as well. And another thing is that we support strengthening capacities. We do understand that the rights holders, they have their own agencies, they have their capacities. However, we also would like our partners to be more independent and to be able to actually tap funding from other donors that maybe required more strict or rigid fiduciary requirements. So, for example, we do some kind of efficiency audit, systems audit in a way that is not about putting, like rating them, but in a way that where are the areas where we as SwedBio can support them and improve the way they work that would allow them also to diversify their source of funding. So in this sense, the key takeaways that I would like to share here is actually that, again, underlining that the communities are the rights holders, their leadership, knowledge, and priorities must guide the work. Because that ensures sustainability and relevance. And then in our experience, maybe others have different experience, that integrating human rights-based approach in funding is not fast nor easy. But that doesn't mean we give up. We are so convinced, and also in our 22 years of existence, that this is the way that we would like to continue going. But it requires intentionality, it requires adaptability, it requires active listening to our partners and continuous learning. and that the communities or the rights holders should be really at the center, and how we foster increased local ownership and agency, and that the accountability is not from the rights holders to the donors, but it has to be mutual, that we as the donor, we also have accountability towards the rights holders, and enhanced learning. Building trust, again, I will come back to that again and again. And it has been mentioned also before by Hater and by Felix, the learning and the adaptive approach, because this enables for stronger collaborations, the innovations, the resilience, and then actually it leads when we do within our program, when we do basically this annual check-in on what are the most significant changes, actually what we achieve as the most significant changes is actually rooted in the trust that we have with our partners. And then last but not least is the long-term support, equitable and inclusive partnerships. So the adaptive funding, the MEL systems that strengthen capacities, and to enable addressing challenges then have more effective and sustainable impact. So I'm going to stop there, and I think it's time for us to maybe have a reflections on what we have just shared with you. We are 24 minutes before 3:30, and actually the idea is to have a breakout group, just to have like a smaller space and hopefully a safe space to just reflect together. What do you think? What you have experienced? What you what's your thought? What could be the challenges? What are the opportunities? So we may not have a lot of time, but I was thinking maybe we could still do that, even if it's just like 10 minutes before we go to a big Q&A in the plenary, that we have this, we try to create a safe space. We understand that some of this discussion could also be quite sensitive. So if that's okay, maybe I could ask for the support from the PCCB colleagues.
Yep, so I'm just going to put everyone into breakout rooms. So we're just doing 2 breakout rooms. There'll be an organizer in each one, and there'll also be another organizer in the main room in case anyone's got any technical difficulties and can't get into a breakout room. But yeah, as has been said, we're a bit tight on time, so maybe about 15-20 minutes, but we'll keep you updated and let you know. So I'll open the rooms now and let me know if anyone has any problems. I think everyone should be joining. Yep. Okay, it worked. For anyone still in here, you might get a notification saying you've been assigned to a breakout room, but if not, you potentially have a setting, something in your settings that doesn't let you join. So just let us know if that's the case.
Can I go for one of the 2, please, Kira?
Pardon?
Can you?
So, Heitor, we are keeping this space with you just in case some of the participants cannot join any of the 2 groups. We can wait for like 5 minutes if you want, because sometimes like participants stay here and they have the discussions, but if nothing is happening, we can direct you to one of the 2 groups.
Okay.
Does that work for you?
Yes,
Okay,
for
thank you.
sure. Thank you.
So you're welcome, Heitor, thank you. So from the participants here in this room, is someone like really attending and following and would like to discuss? Well, if not, okay, maybe Kira, you can just move him
Yeah,
into one of the.
I'll add you to a room. Hold on. Okay, hold on. Sorry. Okay, there you go. I think you should get a little notification soon.
Thank you.
Don't worry. We've got someone waiting in the lobby. Should I admit them?
Yeah, it was only Diana, right? That was. Do we have more people? Yes, Emmanuel.
Yeah, I don't know if this will be one of the breakout rooms, but I can't receive any notification to take me to a group. So I don't know if it will be this one.
Let us try to add you in one of the two breakout rooms.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, I have received it now. Ah, no, it's not.
Okay, Kira,
I'll try again. Sorry, the issue was a few people came up as unable to sign. I'm not too sure why, but I'll try again. Emmanuel.
I think I lost connection for a bit when we were making the breakout groups, so I'm not sure if this is my breakout group or if I should be assigned to somewhere.
Yeah, you should be assigned to another breakout group. This is the main place of the call, but Kira is moving you and Emmanuel to one of the breakout groups.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, sorry. Unfortunately, Emmanuel, for you, you're kind of blank. It says you can't access breakout rooms. I think it must be something in your settings that blocks breakout rooms.
Oh, okay. Then maybe I have to try to check with that. I don't know if time will allow, but thank you for trying.
Yeah, apologies about that. And Diana, hold on, I'll try you. Okay, you should be fine. I'll add you to room 2. There you go. You should get a notification soon, Diana.
Thank you.
Did anyone else maybe leave and then come back or just arrive now because maybe that's why you've not been assigned? And I can try again.
And in
Lydia, do you want me to try again?
Yeah.
Did you just come back?
No, I didn't in a breakout room.
Yeah. Sorry, you also appear not to be able to be assigned because of your settings.
It's okay, thank you.
in any case, later there will be a Q&A session, and you will be able to ask any questions or initiate any discussions there. Or maybe, Kira, we can try to drag Aitor back here. And then...
Yeah. Can I do that? Should I do that? Can I change him to unassigned and bring him back?
Yeah,
Okay.
bring him in. So
Okay, he should come back. And I'll admit him.
hi, haters. So we have 2 participants that cannot be assigned to any breakout group. So if you can have the discussions here. As far as we're concerned, it was Emmanuel and Lydia. So are you still here, Emmanuel and Lydia?
Yes, I'm still around.
Okay, so here we have one of the organizers of this webinar, so you can have the discussions with him.
Yes, thank you for bringing me back, Christina, and hi, Lydia, Emmanuel, pleasure to meet you too. So the space here is actually for listen from, and Lisa, yes, thank you. So the idea here is to listen a bit from you. So what was your reflection after listening to these discussions, but also if right-based finance is already being applicable for you, for your projects, what are the opportunities? What are the challenges for it to become a reality? So if you would like to share some insights. we can start the discussion.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not, sorry, Manuel, I'm not allowed to share screen anymore. I don't know why. If you can allow me again. Thank you. And yes, please go, Emmanuel. Thank you very much.
Okay, for me, maybe I can just share with you some small thoughts that I have. It's unfortunate that, of course, I didn't manage to join the meeting in the good time, so I didn't manage to attend the first presentation. But to my side, what I know about the transformative change, linking with the human rights-based approaches, yeah, it's something that is easy to be done and something that is possible, that if we have the opportunities, that if you can allocate our effort and resources towards it, we can manage to achieve out of it. I would say that I'll share this thing about the opportunity that we have about the local community. Nowadays, we have seen that local communities, they are able to be involved in this work, in these transitions and transformative change projects and works. So we just need to involve them. And most of them, they are very happy if we actively involve them. Not just involve them at the end of the project or maybe in the middle of the project, but we need to start from involving them from the start, the time that we are developing an initiative or we are developing a work, we need to fully involve them. They have to be involved in a way that they should be able to share their societal problems, because some of the projects you can bring them at a local level, at a local context, but you would see that the local communities, that's not the issue that they are looking for to be solved. So if we can involve them from the start, they will be able to share their views. They will be able to know, to share with you the kind of problems that they are willing to be solved. So I would agree with the recent speaker with the point that she mentioned that the active participation of the local community will help to bring the good outcome of the project. So yeah, we just need to do that. The challenge that, of course, we are facing nowadays, we are still talking about it. I don't know when we are going to be done with it. It's the capacity to do with the finance. We all know that finance is an issue in most of African countries. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I'm from Malawi, so I'll put it in my context because Malawi, as you know, it's an African country. So most of our leaders, most of the time, the projects that are being implemented when we talk about climate change and biodiversity, they are being influenced by political interference. A certain project, a certain program may start something, but just because maybe the other government has just changed, they will not be happy to go ahead to proceed with that kind of project. So you would see that that project is being put aside or is put down, that it should not be implemented. So it's something that is also, we need to work on it. We need to influence our leaders so that they should be able to do that work. They should be able to see the importance of biodiversity conservation, because most of them, they are not able to do that. They would go ahead maybe to implement some harmful subsidies in order to have more votes, in order to acquire familiarity from their local levels, from their areas where they are contesting. So it's a big challenge. Yeah, thank you for giving me an opportunity.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. They are great points. I saw Lydia also open the mic. Please, Lydia, you have the floor.
Hi, how are you? Hi, everyone. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to add actually to what Mario alluded to. That the rights dimension is often underrepresented in all the African countries because mainly it's basically a political issue, right? The right dimension is often treated as a peripheral rather than central. It comes last, you know, which then puts us at a risk of reproducing uh, uh, expressions that are inconsistent with what we are actually trying to achieve at the end of the day. The role of women and people and local communities is often like tokenized rather than being upheld by decision makers. They are really neglecting the lived realities of these communities. So they emphasize mostly, technical outcomes rather than putting people in the planet at the center of science. So you find that in as much as many of our African countries have adopted these policies on climate change, biodiversity, and sustainable finance, the right dimension is very put at the forefront. And there is no transparency. There's no
Well,
accountability
oh,
mechanism,
no.
which end up resulting, in a paradox that, at times you might have growing volumes of, finance, but it risks reproducing extractive patterns of development where money flows, but there is no justice, there is no equity, there is no urgency. So, yeah.
Oh, Lydia, thank you very much. Your mic was a bit hard to listen, so I was missing some of the points. If you also would like to short your intervention in the chat, it would be very welcome, so we can also incorporate well and don't miss anything that you have mentioned and shared with us. There was also someone else in this room that was leaning also to share a bit of the perspectives, but it was Liz. Yes, please.
Thank you so much, Eita and Christina, and then Kira for convening this conversation. It's been very impactful today. I'm Robert Ogwang. I am the co-founder and program advisor at Rural Agroecology Network based in northeast of Uganda. So we work with the indigenous community here, and I want to give a reflection around the struggles that the indigenous youth-led initiatives struggle to really reach to some of these spaces. And thanks to the PCCB network, it's been a very incredible opportunity. One of the things that I'm putting across is just the request to ensure that maybe if there are potential collaborations looking at the struggles that the indigenous communities actually go through, and particularly with the capacity development and also the funding to amplify their credible innovations that they are leading at grassroots level. So that would make a lot of sense. And also now, at the moment, we are working with the rural schools, and we are actually scaling up agroecology with rural schools in Karamoja here in the northeast of Uganda. And what we are looking at now, we are working on developing a agroecology curriculum for the schools, and then also the school leadership curriculum, which will actually support some of this. So this is a very incredible work, but we don't have very much robust strength to go into a document that can really inform not only in Uganda, but can inform several other areas. So I would be interested to collaborate with you around this actually ATA and the rest of the team at the PCCB. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Excellent to know more about you and your work and initiative. Yeah, definitely agroecology is something that are completely aligned with transformative change approaches. So happy to keep in touch. And we have two other hands and we have very short time. So I will just pass. Asikaralu, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong, but please, you have the floor.
Hi everyone, my name is Asko Kafo from Village Farmers Initiative Nigeria. I work with, our organization works with smallholder farmers in the rural communities, Southeast Nigeria. So we are really impressed with today's discussion because it's centered around our thematic focus. The impact of climate change on smallholder farmers, especially in food producing communities, cannot be overestimated. So right now, our organization is interested in bringing back lost crop species that has been impacted with the weather events, extreme weather events, flooding of farmlands and communities, and drought in some cases. So we are open for collaboration with any organization who is interested in bringing back those lost agrobiodiversities, especially when it comes to food crops that are staples and dominant within the communities, which is an average home staple food, because it has caused inflation despite all the government intervention programs like opening the border to import food and everything. Still, there's severe hunger right here now in the country. So the only solution is to bring back those lost food crops and trees that serve as food to people and give it to farmers to grow them back into the society. I think that's a very good, it will bring about a very good transformational change, especially when it comes to food security, climate change, and biodiversity. It will not just bring back food to this, it will even balance nature. Because when you don't have those trees, the purposes they're serving are not there. When you don't have those trees and those crops, the birds that feed on them will have nothing to feed on. So there's that gap, both in nature and on humanity and even within the environment. Same thing also applies to the aquaculture, fisheries and aquaculture. Most of the fish stocks are going extinct in the past years. Most of the regular fish stuff that we have in our fresh waters are no more there. And I know it's based on the impact of climate change on the environment. So we really need to work in that area and balance nature, not just bringing food to our tables, but also to be kind to Mother Nature.
Thank you very much, Askarlu. I think just to wrap up, Mark, I know you have your hands up, but we need to go to a Q&A and excuse me, but if you can also contribute now to Q&A. I will start just sharing a bit what happened, because our session I think was quite interesting and focused a lot on different initiatives related with food systems. So the interventions, they were all around how food systems are actually already driving transformative change and connecting food sovereignty with climate change, mitigation, adaptation, and also improving or enhancing biodiversity aspects. So I think this is one a crucial piece for us to understand, but also they have mentioned here how these communities, they are already on the ground. They are already delivering outcomes, but they need to be included in process. They need to be included since the beginning of the design of the projects, the design of the grant proposals, and everything related with that, so that we can really be understand partners, funders and donors, or funders and grantees as actually partners, as Felix mentioned here to us. I will give the floor to Nadia, and yes.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks so much. I will try and be quick. It sounded like an amazing conversation that you had that we just caught a little snippet of when we joined the group. So I'm Nadia. I'm from the Climate and Development Knowledge Network, who have also been part of arranging this event. And I think some of the conversations that we had in our breakout group were, how can we convene more spaces for learning? So that was a comment around bringing in funders, trying to understand how they run processes, especially around this interesting issue around donor due diligence. And then some conversations around really trying to support local initiatives with funding, so to increase the flow into, direct access into the hands of the people that need it, and some interesting examples of how, a research-based program that gets research funding can then also start catalyzing other ways to pool funds to then support conservation efforts in a landscape. Also a comment around supporting some of the legal issues. When you take a rights-based approach, are funders able to support with some of the legal processes for rights holders, and some of the capacity strengthening efforts that might be needed, both for enhancing kind of knowledge around what rights are, but also for donors and funders to strengthen their capacity on what rights-based approaches could be. So handing very quickly over to Puri before we wrap up. I know we are already a minute over time. Puri, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So essentially what we were talking about is around the financial reporting and how it becomes actually a financing burden, and in a way that recognizing that we have diverse knowledge systems, but then the way accountability is understood is just following like one knowledge system, and in a way that is very top down. What would it look like? And is there some collective learning that we can actually gather? Has there been any work done around that? And so yeah.
Thank you so much. And we've also taken notes, and we'll share all of the resources. We'll share the slide decks. We'll share the website links. Following this call, we'll send it to the PTTB, and they can send it to all of the people that registered for this event. I know that, Mark, you had your hand up, and I want to give you a quick moment to just share some of your thoughts. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. My name is Mark Oyamo from Kenya, Kisii University. I'm the founder and the chair of the Club Innovate, a club that focuses more on research and innovation. And one of the goals we are trying to achieve is the SDG in climate change and biodiversity. We are currently doing some trainings in research, and one of the areas we are looking to receive papers from is in climate change. Apart from that, we are also nurturing innovations and linking them to the market, and we are still open to collaborations. We've done a couple of projects with other collaborators outside the country, outside my country, that is, we did a paper with one of the fellows from Colorado and another one from Malta. And we still open up our window to collaborate in attaining these goals. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely to see in the chat people introducing themselves, sharing contacts, other people answering questions. And I think that's what we really wanted to do, was cultivate a space where we can make sense of things together, understand how different people are approaching the topic. So we want to continue with that. I've put a whole lot of links to our different organizations. If you follow us on some of the social media, we will try and have more of these conversations. We'll be meeting at some of the UNFCCC or Convention on Biological Diversity events coming up, so we can share some of the events that we have there. But just to say a huge thank you to everyone that showed up today, and thank you to the PCCB Hub also for holding this conversation, which we hope is the first of many conversations, and really Heitor as well for framing the conversation and helping us understand how a rights-based approach can transform both climate and biodiversity finance into tools of justice and empowerment, and really thinking about how to ensure that funding flows not only to support global targets, but also to strengthen community rights and agency, and that, you know, rights-based finance isn't a charity or an aid, but it really is this legal and moral obligation that's rooted in justice to ensure that resource flows where they're most needed, and especially in ways that uphold dignity and rights. So with that, I'd just like to say thank you, everybody, for being here. Yeah, I wish you well, and let's keep in touch.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank you,
day.
everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.